What is up, all you friends, true believers, and newcomers alike? Superfly Comics guy swinging in from across the Spider-Verse to bring you a review of the Spider-Gwen Omnibus by Jason Latour and Robbi Godriguez. We'll be taking a look at the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and a flip through where I can share some of my thoughts, opinions, and recommendations on this series. So, if you enjoy the video at any point, you know how to show it, and you're always welcome to leave your own thoughts down below in the comments. So with that out of the way, it's time for us to ask the question, is this worth a trip to the Spider-Verse to check out? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Okay, so what you are looking at here is the standard cover to this omnibus by Robbi Godriguez. There is also a direct market variant cover that this omnibus has by Nick Bradshaw. I wish I could have gotten my hands on that one, just because it's that super cool homage to Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane. But I did wait a very, very long time before I picked this book up, so this was the only cover available when I decided to spring for it. But that's okay. Here is the spine, and I absolutely adore the spine of this book. I think it's so colorful and the design is so unique. It just pops off your shelf. Got a great image of a Spider-Gwen down there in the bottom of the spine. And the back. So a kind of modern cover gallery here. These are actually covers from the series, but you don't get all of the covers featured on the back like you might on some other Marvel omnibuses. Cover price of $125 US, $157 Canadian. If you watched the haul video where I first featured this book, you'll know I only paid like $70 Canadian for this, so I'm very happy with that. And the contents here listed in the smallest font ever. You'll have to bear with me here. Edge of Spider-Verse #2, Spider-Gwen 2015A, 1 through 5, and then Spider-Gwen 2015B, 1 through 34. Don't worry, I'll explain what those mean. Spider-Gwen Annual #1, All New Wolverine Annual #1, Spider-Woman Alpha and Omega, Silk, the 2015B series 7 through 8, Spider-Woman, the 2015 series 6 through 7, and Spider-Man, the 2016 series 12 through 14. So that's Miles Morales' series. You might be asking why there's a Spider-Gwen 2015A and a Spider-Gwen 2015B. So yeah, what happened was they launched a Spider-Gwen series in 2015, which ran for 5 issues, but then for some reason they relaunched it and renumbered it again in the same year, and that's where 2015B comes in. It's not even technically a relaunch because it's part of the same series, so I'm not really sure why they did that. A very strange decision, in my opinion. But I can show you under the dust jacket as well. And there we are. So let me actually open this wraparound cover up for you so you can get better acquainted with it. This is actually a panel from the book. I'll talk about the art during my flip-through portion, but I do quite like this panel. It's very well done. Gwen running off there down the alley, and then the shadow of Spider-Gwen or Spider-Woman on the wall there. Very moody, very well done image there. But talking about the flip-through portion, let's get into that. So let's start looking through some of the interior of this book, starting off with some lovely electric blue bookend pages here, matching the color of Spider-Gwen's shoes. Very nice. And you do also get a contents page here, or rather more of a credits page, showing you some of the stories you'll be getting in here, because there's no page numbers or anything like that. But all you really need to know is that in here you're getting the Edge of Spider-Verse issue where Spider-Gwen first appeared, and then you're getting her 2015 series, both of those. I'm going to be doing my best to avoid spoilers as I'm going through the book here. I'm just going to be talking about giving examples of some of the stories you'll be getting in here, explaining a little bit about who Spider-Gwen is, that type of stuff. I will be flipping through the artwork though, so keep in mind you might visually see a spoiler because of that, but that is harder for me to control. But yeah, here we are, Spider-Gwen. So before getting into this, I'll be honest, I was pretty nervous going in. I wasn't originally interested in this series. largely because I wasn't really digging the art style based on some of the examples I'd seen. This is a different universe, and they do sort of some changes to Matt Murdock, for example, that I was skeptical about. But I'm a big fan of these Spider-Verse movies that have recently been making waves in pop culture, so I was willing to give this a try. I do like the Spider-Gwen character, so I told myself, just pretend it's the movie. Just go through this book and pretend it's the movie and see how that works out. So we start off here with Edge of Spider-Verse number 2. This is where Spider-Gwen made her first appearance, and this sort of gives a bit of backstory on the character. So the most important things you need to know is that we're dealing with an alternate universe here, specifically Earth 65, it's called, where Gwen Stacy was the one who was bitten by the spider, and she's the one who gained powers, whereas Peter Parker was bullied and eventually became the Lizard. And then he and Gwen had a big sort of superhero, supervillain battle, and Peter was accidentally killed in that fight. And after that, Gwen continues as Spider-Woman. She is the Spider-Woman of this universe. That is how she's referred to. They don't call her Spider-Gwen. That would defeat kind of the secret identity purpose. But yeah, that is how she learned the great power, great responsibility lesson. And that's how Edge of Spider-Verse number 2 concludes. That is her origin story. And I gotta say, fantastic costume design. Spider-Gwen, out of all the alternate universe Spider people, she's got to be one of the ones with just the coolest costume. Very, very well done. When she's not Spider-Woman, Gwen plays in a band called the Mary Janes, so some very tongue-in-cheek references there. So she's balancing school as well, but her father is the police captain of the police department, and he's after her, so that causes some conflicts as well. And then, it's an alternate universe, so there's sort of, twists on characters, like Matt Murdock is actually presented as Kingpin's lawyer in this, and that was very strange for me. Foggy Nelson is the DA. Frank Castle is captain of the Special Crimes Unit, and he's actually trying to unmask Gwen all throughout this series, so they have kind of a running conflict. But that's pretty much your introduction to this universe. There's lots of little tweaks to familiar characters in here. For example, one of the villains Gwen goes up against, the Green Goblin, who's got a very, very weird costume in this universe. I found it to be a kind of a mix between the Beetle and the Lost Ninja Turtle. So that was okay. And yeah, like I said, it was very weird for me to see Matt Murdock being portrayed as a villain, especially because Daredevil is my third favorite superhero. This series does eventually explain why Matt Murdock is that way. But I'll be honest, even after that explanation, I don't think it quite stuck the landing. It was I didn't really understand Matt Murdock's motivations even after that. Because usually when you have an alternate universe version of a character, typically they still behave similarly to the original, with some minor changes in the timeline, but this didn't really feel like Matt Murdock to me. So I think it's best as you're reading to just pretend he's a different character altogether. And once you do, I think Matt Murdock made for an interesting kind of villain for this story. So I was able to get over that. What kind of threw me for a loop is that this run was a lot more grim, actually, than I was expecting. It's not as lighthearted as the artwork here might make it seem. It can actually get pretty depressing at times. Gwen here is a very lonely person. She struggles to connect with people. Her relationships tend to fall apart, like with her bandmates and with Aunt May and Uncle Ben after the incident with Peter. And then meanwhile, as she's going out as Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman. I'm just gonna refer to her as Spider-Gwen from now on. As Spider-Gwen, it seems like the world is out to get her. The public actually views her as a menace. The police are after her. Frank Castle is after her, trying to unmask her. And then you have all the villains coming after her. She actually carries a lot of trauma and guilt with her. Now, granted, Spider-Man does this too. The regular universe Spider-Man, his life is full of trauma and harrowing experiences as well. But he's different in the sense that Spider-Man has this sort of fire within him, this innate drive to want to keep going no matter how bad things may get. And that makes him a very compelling character to read, very inspiring. That's one of the things I like most about Spider-Man. Gwen here, on the other hand, has a tendency to get really enveloped and consumed by her dark thoughts. She kind of actually wallows in them for a majority of this run. And, you know, with her, there's this distinct lack of hopefulness compared to Spider-Man. And to be honest, that can actually lead to a feeling of exhaustion while reading this. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a little bit of comic relief still in this run. It's not all doom and gloom city. For example, there's this running joke where there's this recurring pest known as the Bodega Bandit that Spider-Gwen has to stop. Just this overwhelming goofball who goes around robbing convenience stores in the most non-threatening way possible, and Spider-Gwen just has to occasionally deal with him. She'll still be cracking jokes and quipping while fighting. There's a bit towards the beginning where she suffers a head injury and starts to hallucinate Spider-Ham in her head, so that was pretty funny. So there is some comic relief in here, but not as much as I was expecting. At one point, there is a crossover with Silk and Spider-Woman from the main Marvel Universe, and that's because Spider-Gwen actually has a dimensional travel watch that lets her sort of go to the main universe and then back to her universe, so that's why she's able to cross over with these fine ladies here. And I gotta say, the artwork here in these Spider-Woman issues is the best in the whole omnibus. This is by Joelle Jones, the art, and it's so clean looking. I loved this. All the different creative panels and angles. Really liked this art style for this crossover. But also, there's another consequence of this sort of crossover. Without going into too much detail, there is a point in this story where Gwen is left with a finite amount of times that she can use her spider powers. She kind of has to treat them like an on-off switch. And if you've read the early issues of Spawn, a similar thing happens there too. So then, you know, that starts to raise questions for her like, do I use my powers or not? Is this worth using my powers? How do you define what's worth using my powers or not? So that was pretty interesting. There's also a crossover with Miles Morales in here. So that's where those issues of Spider-Man come from, which was the name of Miles' series at this time. And this is pretty interesting because Gwen has to help Miles track down his dad, who's mysteriously gone missing at this point in time. And in here, you have some lovely art by Sara Pichelli. I recently discovered that is the proper way to pronounce her name. So Sara Pichelli, she's wonderful, draws some really amazing artwork. It's, you know, art like this that made me wish the rest of the artwork in this omnibus was drawn this way, but I'll get into that a little bit later. And then after that, you also get a bit of a arc with Venom. So Spider-Gwen gets her own Venom arc. That portion of the book has probably some of the best covers and coolest covers in the whole omnibus. But yeah, Venom. So they take a very scientific approach to Venom in this universe, very similar to what the Ultimate Universe did as well. where the symbiote is not really an alien, it's sort of a substance that's been engineered. But I actually quite enjoyed the Venom arc in here, because in the Ultimate Universe, Peter had the symbiote for a very, very short period of time, whereas in here, Gwen actually holds on to it for quite a few issues. And if you know about the symbiote, you know that it enhances characteristics of its host. So you remember those dark thoughts I mentioned that Gwen has throughout this run? Those actually play a pretty big role here during the symbiote arc. Gwen has to definitely make some complex moral decisions, and I think the Venom arc is probably the best part of this book, storytelling-wise. But I do want to also talk about the art in this omnibus. So most of the Spider-Gwen series here is done by Robbi Rodriguez, and I've heard his style described as sort of a manga-esque. And yeah, I can definitely see that, but I don't think it was really for me. I don't know, you can let me know your thoughts based on some of the other art I've featured so far, but it wasn't really my cup of tea. It kind of came off pretty flat to me. It can be a little bit confusing sometimes in terms of depth because of that. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's the inking that's at fault. There isn't really a heavy use of inks here. So sometimes the panels can seem kind of flat, and, the characters don't really look like people. It sort of looks more like cardboard cutouts of people. And I wasn't really feeling that, although there are quite a lot of fun homages to very well-known and iconic Spider-Man panels. So I've already touched on the DM variant for this book that Todd McFarlane posed, but you also get some fun references to, for example, a panel from Spider-Man No More. So it's, there's some fun references and stuff, but I don't think that's enough to carry the entire art of the book. Moving on to the extras section here. So we start off here with a bit of an afterword, Gwensel's Down, as it's lovingly referred to, from some of the creators, revealing their thoughts about the series after it's ended. We also get some scripts in here, which I will skip over. Some work in progress art from some of the stories. Some character bios from some of the characters who are featured in this story. Notably, these are the alternate universe versions of these character bios, as you would expect. So you got Jessica Drew and Silk, Kraven the Hunter. You can see kind of some examples of how some of these alternate universe Earth 65 versions of these characters look like. There's the Bodega Bandit I mentioned earlier. Absolute tragic, just useless villain. And then you have a gallery of variant covers here, which are very, very nice. And some of these just make me wish that was the art we were getting in this book rather than the one we got. It's just, yeah, there's that DM variant cover. So cool, right? Again, wish I could have got that one. But yeah, really, actually, you get quite a lot of variant covers in here, which is nice. We don't have to go through all of them, but we can flip through a few. There's some action figure ones. Yeah, the variants are very nice. Civil War, Terry Dodson. There's a fun one featuring Gwenom and Spider-Gwen. Nice homage to that classic issue with Venom. How to draw Spider-Gwen. And that is that. That is the end of your extra section. All right, so as for the build quality of this book, I got to open up with a bit of a disclaimer here. What you are looking at is a repaired version of this binding that I had to do myself. When I first did my haul video featuring this book, I thought the iron binding looked pretty good, but turns out that was not the case. This book had some pretty crappy binding, and it had some issues where the page signatures were separating from the glue. And, this is not an issue specific to my copy, actually, because I did check out the Comic Book Trove's video on this omnibus as well, and he said he was experiencing the same issue with this omnibus. So I had to open up the binding, get some glue in there, fix it myself, and now it's a little bit better. But keep that in mind. There seem to be some build quality issues with this book. If you're curious about the repair procedure, let me know if you'd like me to make a video on that. I'm willing to show you that process if you are curious how I did it. But otherwise, this omnibus has 1,224 pages. Like I said, the eye is okay. Binding seems to be pretty crap. It lays over okay because of that pretty big eye, but as you can see, there are still some spots where the page signatures are just too far apart, and then you can see through to some of the glue layer, which isn't great. But otherwise, no gutter loss, and I never really noticed any instances of page bleed with this omnibus. I mean, if it does appear, it's very, very faint, but in my opinion, not enough to ruin the reading experience in the same way that the binding does. But let's wrap up with some closing thoughts here. Overall, I'd say this run was okay. It was all right. But I can't lie, I do feel a little bit disappointed by it. I think the idea of Spider-Gwen is brilliant and has a lot of potential. She's a very interesting character with a lot of facets, and because of that, I am still interested in checking out the Ghost Spider Omnibus that's coming out soon. But I don't think her potential was fully realized here, and that's okay. Some characters, I understand, need time before they find their stride. I mean, just take a look at the X-Men before Chris Claremont came along, or Daredevil before Frank Miller. So I understand that. There's good moments in here. I very much enjoyed the crossover with Silk and Spider-Woman, the crossover with Miles, the Venom arc towards the end, but the other parts of this book weren't as strong for me, and I was never able to really click with Robbi Rodriguez's art style, even by the end of this book. I'd say if you have a strong interest in Spider-Gwen, or you're a huge fan of the Spider-Verse movies, I think this might be worth a try, but definitely this is not a must-read, I would not say. But that's been my review of the Spider-Gwen Omnibus. Let me know what you guys thought about the book, the review, the series inside. What do you think about the artwork? What's your opinion? Leave your thoughts down below. But I'll say thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon. So you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, you keep reading. Bye-bye, guys.